Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. It looks like we're at 12 o'clock now. I feel like maybe we should have had some music playing in the background as people as people waited and got started. I appreciate everyone who has been able to join us today, and also for your patience with rescheduling this presentation a couple times. But here we are today, making it happen. I want everyone to know that this presentation is being recorded, so that we're able to share it out afterwards for those who were unable to attend. We will also be posting on our YouTube channel, and I will send it out to all the participants as well. But if you're just joining, welcome. This is the DELN Digital Equity Learning Network presentation with our guest speaker, Charles Wesley from the Seattle Public Library, and he will be presenting today. His presentation is called Cybersecurity is Equity Work. I'm going to go ahead. I know some people are still joining. Sorry, everybody. My computer's acting up. But if you're not familiar with Digital Equity Learning Network, we are based out of Seattle and King County. Most of our coalition member organizations are also based out of Seattle and King County, that we play nice statewide as well as across the United States. You are welcome to get in touch with us. I'll post our website, our LinkedIn, my email if you need to reach out. I'm happy to connect with you individually. And today, the majority of the time we'll be using on the presentation. We'll also have some time for Q&A, although I will leave it to Charles to let us know if he wants questions during the presentation. I will certainly be keeping an eye on the chat if you're more comfortable putting your chats there. But just know if you're not able to ask it right when you're thinking of it, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, and DELN, I spoke a little bit about it, but we are a collaboration of community-based organizations, public-private institutions, and individuals invested in digital equity in our region of Seattle-King County. We provide opportunities to connect our local digital equity community with shared resources, create partnerships, gain knowledge of best practices, and increase awareness and support for community efforts. And if you're at this meeting, you're probably pretty familiar with digital equity and inclusion. But if you're not, this definition is taken from NDIA. Digital inclusion are the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. This includes affordable, robust broadband internet service, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, access to digital literacy training, quality technical support, and applications and online content designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. And how can you support DELN? You can participate in the meeting that you're in right now, our bi-monthly virtual meetings. You are welcome to join our listserv and participate in our community, sharing your resources or updates. I'll also share our membership form. You can that will also add you to the listserv, and you can also become a member. You can partner with us to advocate for more resources for digital equity, which is more important now than ever. You can also join a working group for advocacy or program planning and membership. And if you'd like to be listed on the website as a member, go ahead and fill that form out. Again, I'll share it in the chat as I hand this off to Charles. But Charles, if you're ready, I know I saw you earlier. You said hello. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you. I believe you're sharing, so I'm happy to pull this down whenever you're ready. But I would like to welcome Charles Wesley of the Seattle Public Library, who is here to present today. Cybersecurity is equity work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, it's great to be here, and I'm glad that we're able to have an opportunity to connect again. And welcome to those of you who I haven't met before. My name is Charles Wesley. I'm the Library Technology Officer for the Seattle Public Library. We serve a large and diverse community. We have 26 branch locations throughout the city, as well as our central library in downtown Seattle. We provide information access through physical and virtual collection of books and materials, internet access through public computers and Wi-Fi. We provide mobile services. We do programming and outreach in person and online, amongst many, many other things. If you're not familiar with us, we have roughly 700 staff, and we serve the entire city of Seattle. We've had, I think it was around 250,000 active patrons through our systems in recent years, just to give you a little bit of size and scope. Our IT department, which I have the honor of leading, is a small but mighty team. We're 18 people, and our IT department is a full service IT department. So we support operations and connectivity across all of our locations, including our enterprise network and compute capabilities. We support enterprise software and services. We do end user support. We support enterprise data for data analytics and reporting, and of course, cybersecurity. But I'm here today to talk with you a little bit about the intersection of cybersecurity and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm going to pause real quick and just share my screen because I have a PowerPoint for you all that I would love for you to be able to see. Right. Second. Okay. Are you seeing my slides?
Not quite. Oh, looks like it's starting to share there. Yep.
Okay, cool. So like I said, I want to talk with you a little bit about how cybersecurity and equity really are related, and how cybersecurity is equity work. There was a question earlier about comments, questions. Please feel free to put things into the chat. I would love to have this be a conversation. I have got, I think, a pretty good summary of like what our experience has been here at the library with our ransomware event. But really, I want to hear from some of you about questions that you have or ideas that you have. So please feel free to ask questions during this. We can also have a conversation at the end if you like. All right. So like I said, the library is a complex organization. We serve a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. We do a lot of different things. And when you think about all the things that the library does, there is a intersection between cybersecurity and what we do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Specifically, I'm going to talk about my own experience leading our organization through this significant cybersecurity event that we had last year. And I'm going to speak a little bit about how that experience has informed my perspective. DEI, just as a thing, is a very large and complex problem space. There are many folks on this call, I'm sure, that have done so much work in this space and know a lot more than I do about a lot of things. But to put this in context, I'm coming to this discussion really from my perspective as a leader. That is just one piece of the overall puzzle. So I don't have all of the answers. But my goal is to share some insights about how these issues manifest themselves just within my spheres of influence, and to share some insight into what happens when cybersecurity and equity intersect that either may not be apparent or obvious to folks who work adjacent to IT in the DEI space, or things that have become more clear, I think, for me in the wake of our experience last year. So just really broadly, I'm going to cover at a high level cybersecurity and equity, so we have some common context. I'm going to talk a little bit about the attack that SPL experienced last year. I want to talk a little bit about kind of an either or binary that I've seen manifest itself in multiple ways, both before, during, and after our attack. And then I'd like to really open up and have a discussion about what equitable security really looks like. So for just a grounding exercise, especially if cybersecurity isn't your main jam, when we talk about cybersecurity, there's lots of different ways that you can organize it. A common way to think about cybersecurity is through the lens of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. This is a framework that's developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology that just defines a structured approach to talking about and managing cybersecurity and cybersecurity risks. So at a high level, the NIST CSF encompasses really 5 core functions. Identify, which really focuses on understanding your organization's assets, your infrastructure, and related risks. It includes defining roles and responsibilities and establishing really just a strategy for how you're going to manage your risk. Protect is about implementing security measures to safeguard critical systems and data. Detecting is really emphasizing the ability to identify and analyze incidents as they occur, and also to be a bridge to establishing an incident response plan. And then your response is about what steps your organization will take when a security incident occurs, including how do you contain it, how do you communicate, and what kinds of recovery efforts do you need to be able to bridge into. And in the recovery domain, really focusing there on your systems and data restoration after an incident, which ideally is defined in a recovery and business continuity plan. But by categorically breaking the complexity of cybersecurity into these domains, the practitioners really can just dive deep then in understanding how each domain applies within the organization. So if you think of cybersecurity as a discipline comprised of many domains encompassing deep and complex issues, diversity, equity, inclusion as a discipline is also a complex discipline comprised of many domains, which also encompass deep and complex issues. So within this context of DEI, we often have conversations about intersectionality as an example of a particularly complex problem space. And where an individual can experience multiple forms of discrimination due to their intersectional or intersecting identities, the barriers and the lived experience can be very individual or unique. And when trying to address systemic inequity and barriers at scale, this complexity makes the work very hard, and it can result in unintended consequences or outcomes. Largely speaking, there are many structural, technical, political, social, and financial economies of power that influence how complex systems function generally. And when these economies of power are applied to disciplines like cybersecurity or like equity, it's a really monumental challenge. And so when we look at the intersection of cybersecurity and equity, it's a compounding effect where the challenge is just that much greater. So I'd like to share a little bit with you about the attack that the library experienced by way of giving you some context of like what this looked like in practice and how we experienced it. So nearly a year ago, brings up a lot of feelings, I think, for many of us, myself especially, but nearly a year ago, over Memorial Day weekend, SPL experienced a cyber attack. Simply put, a threat actor, which is what we call the bad guys, gained unauthorized access to our network, and they quickly located and exfiltrated a tranche of data before launching a ransomware attack that rapidly spread within our systems. We did respond quickly, and we worked with library staff, some third-party partners, and other government agencies to contain the attack, to assess the impact, and to work to maintain library operations and services, even if at a significantly reduced capacity. I won't get into the gory details of the attack, simply just because it's not really relevant to our discussion today. But truthfully, while many cyber attacks share a lot of common challenges and issues, the specific details of each attack will be different. It's often said in the cybersecurity space, it's not a if but when kind of a scenario. And I think largely, over a long enough period of time, just over time and frequency, the probability of something happen approaches one. So whether your cyber attack that your organization experiences is a minor one or a major one is you know determined by a lot of factors, and how you're going to experience it and what challenges it's going to present to you is going to be different. So your cyber attack will be different than my cyber attack. Your threat actor may be different than mine. Their motivations may be different. Their leverage may be different. So for this reason, I'll just simply say that your organization. I'm making an assumption of who I'm speaking to. So I'm assuming that either you um, are in IT or you work in an organization that's supported by IT, or maybe you're all of them because you're really small. But whatever your organization is, you should have a point of view for how something like the cybersecurity framework applies to your organization, and think about what your strategy and tactics should be within the cybersecurity domain. But for us, the impact of our attack, it was significant. So due to the attack, and really our existential priority was to contain the damage and secure our environment. So we did take the immediate step of completely disconnecting our entire network from the public internet. Um, but on this basis, from that initial point, and we did that within hours of really becoming aware of like, this is what is happening. Our recovery started at that moment, and it consisted of several parallel and interrelated work streams. We had technical and forensics analysis work being done. We had systems recovery work being done. We had to negotiate and talk to the threat actor, which was its own area. We had to maintain daily operations for the library. And eventually, we were iteratively restoring our services until we had returned back to normal operations. So from the very first few days of the attack, SPL was applying an equity lens to this incident. And I will say that the very first major operational decision that was made by our chief librarian, and that was within the first day of the attack, was that the library was going to keep our doors open. Technology is ubiquitous today, and it's sometimes hard to imagine like what life would be like if there was no technology. But at its core, a really basic function of the library is to serve as one of the few remaining third spaces in our communities. So beyond internet access, beyond books, and other technology-based services, our libraries are a physical place that many in our community really depend on. So maintaining operations, keeping our buildings open while dealing with the ransomware attack and the recovery was from the very beginning how our recovery plan was going to operate, which meant that from a technical perspective, recovering from a ransomware attack is a very complex process. There are a lot of complex dependencies within IT infrastructure and systems, and there is a certain order that things need to be done in order to really unlock something. So to restore internet access, for example, there's a bunch of dependent systems that have to be brought back online in a certain order in order to allow for that to happen. And similarly for things like internet access, ebook access, some material circulation, all those things, for example. But in our case, we took a holistic look at how we could accomplish this within the context of a few key guiding principles. We needed to ensure the security of our environment and our services before we brought them back online. We needed to ensure that the organization was operationally ready to be able to provide these services to the public. And we needed to prioritize bringing services back online in a way that provides relief to the most vulnerable in our community that rely on our services, over popular but not critical services that many patrons enjoy but don't depend on. I just want to point out like that you should notice that neither immediate or quick was a primary guiding principle in this. In a situation where everything is down, there's a natural pressure to sometimes want to get things back up as quickly as possible. However, quickly restoring access while putting the organization or patrons at increased risk for further harm is not the right thing to do. So what the library developed was an order of operations strategy where over 2 week iterations, services were prioritized for restoration. Early iterations focused on those core networking and enterprise compute enabling functions that were necessary for higher level and patron facing services. But by July, we were able to begin circulating materials again using a staff assisted checkout model, and we were able to restore public Wi-Fi. We prioritized public Wi-Fi over staff Wi-Fi and even over public access to computers. Because while not all patrons have their own devices, many do, and ensuring that they could connect was a high priority for us. But in contrast, we didn't restore public PC access until much later, which was in August for us. But this was a function of us needing to ensure the security and privacy of our patron internet use, which we felt warranted the extra time to be able to really be confident that we were able to provide that. Cybersecurity and equity is not an either or binary. So through the recovery process, there was a natural tension between cybersecurity and equity. Should we source something as quickly as possible to connect patrons with access, or should we slow down? As we recovered our systems, should we increase the security requirements and speed up our cybersecurity roadmap items, or will that create barriers to access? Before and after the attack, I've seen this kind of cybersecurity kind of versus equity question manifest itself in several ways. And I think for everyone who is working in these spaces, it's a, how should I say it? It's like, it's only human, I think, to really try to simplify. It's human nature to try to simplify things. So my main point really for you today is this, that it is an oversimplification to think of progress in equity space equals removing barriers and increasing access, full stop. It is an oversimplification to think that cybersecurity equals building fortifications. So how does this manifest itself every day? I'm going to use an example that I think is probably one that would be relatable for most people because I've worked in public sector for 20 years. I've been with a library for 4 years. I've worked for a local jurisdiction in the Puget Sound area, city government. I've worked in higher education with the University of Washington. And this example I'm going to provide you, I have seen at every single one of my organizations. So this is kind of a universal thing I would be as bold to say. So I think your perspective really is driven by, in part, your position within the organization. So if you're a program manager looking to provide access for your community, it is natural to think of technology as a resource and a tool that you can use to accomplish your goals. And because we're often in a resource constrained environment, taking what you can to do what you can is often how things happen. We all need to be resourceful and we all need to be looking at how we can solve problems and be able to move things forward. So as a hypothetical, let's say that you have access to a grant and you'd like to use that to provide some assistive technology or other type of technical resource that you can integrate into your community problem. So if you go and you talk with your peers and you look at the marketplace and you kind of find what is the thing that is the most accessible and going to really help me to accomplish my goals, if you find that solution and you're able to afford it, then you get it, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? And once you have the stuff, you start working with your community partners. And as you're working with them, you may hear some frustrations about certain things like how they access files or, hey, can we use, service X because that's what I'm the most comfortable with or that makes the most sense to me. Or can we use Platform Y for being able to join online meetings and to be able to collaborate and interact? In the environment that we're in, where so many of these things are available as a commodity, as a service, um, if you're able to stretch that grant and get some of these services tied together, you're going to have like a really like well built and designed and accessible solution for how you want to be able to provide your services. And then one day, your friendly library technology officer comes along and is like, hey, um, these tablets and these online services aren't supported by the IT department, and we have concerns about that. And like you think of like all the hard work that you've put into trying to get this going, all the resources that you've had to come up, you're doing all these things for the right reasons. Surely IT must not understand or value the impact of this program. Meanwhile, in the IT department, there's an initiative to ensure that the library is not collecting or retaining sensitive patron information. So, for example, in the post 9/11 years, with the introduction of the Patriot Act, the library, as a matter of principle, decided to only retain patron borrowing information while it was operationally necessary. So, in practice, what this meant is that once you returned your book, the library didn't retain a record saying that me, Charles Wesley, read The Grapes of Wrath. Once I returned the item, it didn't matter that me, Charles Wesley, read that book. It's just helpful for our statistics to know that a patron checked this book out, and we need to buy more copies of it because we want to make sure that people have access to it. Or we don't need to buy more copies of it because it's not as popular as it used to be, and we can, redirect that shelf space and those dollars for different materials. This protected my privacy as a patron, and was designed specifically to ensure that a third party couldn't access my reading history. So if we kind of harken back to the NIST CSF framework, if the IT department isn't able to identify an organization's assets or risks um, because it doesn't know that what the organization has, then we're going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to cybersecurity. We can't protect systems or information if it exists kind of in a shadow kind of IT type environment. And the IT department can't detect incidents or respond to them in these systems. And we also can't recover services that are unsupported or unmanaged services. So there's a natural tension between these two different disciplines. So I think that when we think about our incident, just check real quick on my slides. Okay.
Charles, I have a quick question. When you said unmanaged services, do you mean any service that's not managed by the IT team at the organization?
It's a really good question, and I will answer it this way. The answer is kind of, it depends. Managed is a thing, it's not a who. And so in a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about collaboration and partnership. It is important that an organization intentionally manages and understands what it has and what is in it and what the risks are. And it should be a collective responsibility. And so it may be that for your organization, you decide that for operational reasons or capability reasons, IT is the natural place for that. It may be not. And I'll touch a little bit later on data management and data handling. I think it is, and I just thank you for the question because I think that's a point that maybe I would have put into one of the slides or talked a little bit more explicitly is that cybersecurity not only is equity work, cybersecurity is not IT only work. It is a collective thing. It is the overall sum of policies, practices, procedures, capabilities, all those things. And IT is a big part of that and an enabler of a lot of that, but IT is not the owner of all of that. So thank you. That was a really good question. Okay. So if we were to think a little bit about the equity impacts of a security compromise. And I'm using this example specifically because I have, through this experience, I'm seeing these patterns. So I mentioned earlier in our recovery that we collectively understood that just doing something as quickly as possible wasn't necessarily the most sustainable way to recover. And in the example I just provided, it is faster to immediately implement a solution like what I just described above. It comes with risks, and those may not be understood or appreciated by everyone. But when we think about equitable cybersecurity, I really believe it's the balance between bridging the gap for those who need access to technology, while also understanding that vulnerable populations are disproportionately impacted by cyber attacks. So ensuring the safety and confidentiality of patron information and reducing the risk of a long-term outage that could have a significant impact on our community should there be a big attack. That is also the work of equity. So when we think of cybersecurity work as equity, I think we can expand our understanding of what it is to provide access and bridge the digital divide. I think it's helpful to define kind of the minimum viable criteria, maybe, that an organization think a service has to have to be securely and equitably serving the community. So from an IT perspective, it means a cybersecurity solution should be designed and implemented in a way that is accessible to all users. And I'll just flag for this that like this is a topic that is not well discussed or really prioritized or valued in the cybersecurity community. There are a lot of things that are kind of historical best practices that are not very accessible or equitable to people. So that is a problem that you should be working to address. And that is something where IT can really take the leadership on is how do we make something secure, but secured in a way that people can still access without undue burden or completely being unable to participate in it. And that also needs to include those with limited technical skills. But it also needs to recognize that specific needs and vulnerabilities of certain groups, including children, the elderly, or those with limited resources, we need to prioritize their protection as well. And I think we also need to have transparency and accountability. So really the organization needs to ensure that its policies and practices are both equitable and secure. And really ask ourselves, are we being good stewards of sensitive patron data? Are we protecting them? So what does this look like? So as a guiding principle, like when we talk about the intersection of cybersecurity and equity, I think what we're really talking about is protecting access and limiting harm. The focus needs to really be on ensuring equitable access to information for everyone, especially vulnerable populations. It also means minimizing harm by implementing measures that protect users while reducing risks associated with data breaches. It requires really that all individuals, regardless of background, receive protection in the digital space. So in the wake of the ransomware attack at the library, I have been leading efforts to both increase our security capabilities informed by the NIST framework and highlight obstacles or dilemmas that are arising through this. And I think it's important to understand that when you embark on this work, your environment is not suddenly changing around you. When we work to implement certain cybersecurity strategies, for example, it doesn't create equity dilemmas, it only surfaces them. Many of these risks or problems have existed the entire time. In some cases, it's just now that like we're becoming more aware of them. And once you become aware of some of these things, then you do have a duty to do something about it. So I think it's critical that this increased awareness should be understood as the intersection of two disciplines that are very complex. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there are environmental factors, these overlapping economies of power, they're acting on both disciplines. And while it is much harder and it does slow down certain activities on a short-term basis. Much like in our ransomware recovery, I think organizations should aspire to develop mid and long-term strategies to further our equity agenda while maintaining a robust security posture. Clayton, I see your hand up.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Uh, I don't know if it's appropriate at this time, but listening to you, that you're doing this, one of the key to share, maybe not right now, but when the time is available, the the issues here that you're talking about is so far there's nothing that's really changing because it's still using the same Wi-Fi infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
There is another way to do it. And I would love to share that with everybody on this call and everybody in this country. I've got a way in my office right now in Harlem that I cannot be hacked at all. A whole different way using a different infrastructure. So if it's appropriate for me to give a little bit more detail on that later on, let me know. But I just had to get that out there right now because the
Yeah,
same thing that we're talking about listening is the same sort of hacking capability, whether you're in or outside of the building
yeah.
currently. But there's
No,
new infrastructure now. There's new infrastructure.
I would love to hear more about that. And I'm just looking at the time. I don't have actually that much more. So if you're cool, just hanging on for a sec, I'll wrap up, and then I'd love to hear more about that because I do think, and this is getting a little ahead of myself, but I do think that the collaboration and partnership within organizations is really important, and the collaboration and partnership in communities like we are in right now, where we are all working together in some of these same challenging environments, if there are new and different ways of approaching some of this stuff, it behooves us to share and learn about that. So thank you for sharing. I definitely want to hear more about it. Um, and actually, so let me just skip to a couple of these last slides real quick and we can have more conversation. So um, what can you do? Um, this is a really, this is 8 bullet points. Like this is not even scratching the surface on like the complexity of what we can do. But I also want to just acknowledge that I don't know everybody who's on the call. And for some of us who are focusing on this a lot or in really big organizations that have a lot of resources and like we're thinking really deeply about things, like there's a lot there. If you're a really small organization, if you're like a couple people trying to get things going and this feels like cybersecurity is so big and complex, how could we possibly do it? I wanted to share this list just as a starting point for you and for everybody else. We can dive really deep on it, but um, cybersecurity training is something that you should be thinking about, both for your staff and for the public. Sorry, let me pull up my notes because I have more detail. Um, our people are our biggest asset and our weakest link is like kind of a cliche in the cybersecurity world, but like it really is true. So think about how can you incorporate cybersecurity awareness training and best practices into the day-to-day work that your people are doing, whether that's using tools to help you identify like, hey, did somebody click on a link in their email and then try and run something or what? Even if it's just helping people to understand how they can um, do simple things to protect themselves. Like that is something that you don't need a huge training budget to be able to do. And there's a lot of resources out there that you can use to inform some of those practices. You should be thinking about securing your communication tools. So know what information you're sharing, where it's being stored, in what tools it's in, and try and make sure it's as secure as you can. Also use things like multi-factor authentication or other techniques to increase the security of your logins. In our event, there was a kind of a two-step, and it started with a account was used to access our network remotely. And so we don't necessarily know how or why that account was compromised, but that was the first link in the chain. Um, Establishing protocols. So like I mentioned in the CSF framework, there are a couple of points where it calls out like where you should have some protocols, whether it's policies, procedures, otherwise. But I think whether it's for acquiring technology, whether it's how you manage or handle your data, or how you recover and respond, or how you respond and recover to cybersecurity incidents, um, you can go really, really deep, but you can also at even a really basic level, just by going through that methodically and having those conversations, you can probably do a lot to assess what you're doing now and how maybe you could be doing things differently. Data protection, protecting your data, whether it's for your own staff, or for your patrons or your customers, whatever you call the people whom you serve. It is really crucial to maintaining their trust, and ensuring their privacy and security and limiting harm is a function of what we need to do. It's a core thing. Um, Safe access to services, really, I'm just touching on, again, ensuring safe access to services is essential to providing those services, and that does make them more resilient. Transparent security measures. I think it's important to maintain transparency around what you're doing with security and why, to build trust and confidence. So if it's, I would like to use X, and we're saying we can't necessarily use X today because we aren't able to secure it at a level that makes us feel like we're doing justice to the people who are using it, like that is being transparent. And over time, ostensibly, we should be able to build trust that we are all working towards a common goal, and that there is a way that we can accomplish mutually the goals that we're trying to accomplish. Training the public, I call that out as a separate one. There is a need, and this is really my plea to folks, because I support the IT infrastructure and the services of the library. I'm an enabler. I'm not creating programs, and so there is a need in the community for free or affordable cybersecurity and education programs. Cybersecurity awareness is much lower in underserved populations. And it does need to be increased so that people understand the risks of cybercrime and how they can protect themselves online, whether that's using our systems or just how they use their own technology in their day-to-day life. And then lastly, I touched on this earlier, but collaboration between different stakeholders. Cybersecurity is equity work too, and collaboration to share and develop best practices and to design and grow secure and equitable services is the way that we can accomplish a shared goal, which is to provide access, but in a sustainable way, and in a way that ensures that we're protecting the people that are depending on us, and that we can reduce the likelihood that our systems or our services would be unavailable for a really long period of time due to a cybersecurity event. So with that, we've got about 15 minutes left. And so I did want to save time for a conversation. I really appreciate your interest and your willingness to chat. I did say use the chat, and then because I've got like 30 million windows open, I have not read the chat. So maybe,
yeah, I'll jump in
yeah.
and share from the chat. And honestly, I think that the questions just came in a few minutes ago, so you did not miss much.
Cool.
And Clayton, I was going to ask you maybe after we're done with questions to present your solution, if that's okay. Okay, the first question.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Thank you. I'll ask the questions here in the order that they were received. Jessica Hilburn asked, are there free resources where social service programs can have their tech processes evaluated for safety of their users? I'm thinking about our student tech lending library, for example. When devices are returned, when devices are returned, the user data is wiped. But is this enough to protect our vulnerable students? Many are refugees or immigrants.
A really good question, and I'm going to answer it in a couple of different ways. Here, I'll stop. Hold on. Let me stop sharing my screen because I don't think you need to see my thank you slide anymore. All right, cool. So The reason I'm answering this the way that I am is because we are in very interesting times. So my standard answer would be yes, there are free resources, and they're going to be in a couple of different places. So depending on your location, what jurisdiction you're in, if you're in Washington State or out of Washington State, there are federal, state, and sometimes local resources that you can look to. I can just speak to the library. The library made a lot of um, use of the free services that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Administration provided, CISA, CISA. They were able to do different types of assessments for us that was informed by the CSF, the cybersecurity framework. And they're also able to do some limited kind of reviews of specific systems. And so, like what you had as a use case as something that they could take a look at and give you kind of a risk or overall security assessment is something that historically they have been doing. Um, I am very aware of how the current political environment is really putting all of our federal resources and services under extreme pressure. And I do know that CISA is included in all of that. So um, if you do have an interest in reaching out to them, there are really good people working there. And if they are able to continue helping, they absolutely will. But that one may be a little less available than it has been in the past. But there are also state agencies that have cybersecurity services. The state of Washington has an Office of Cybersecurity that also has some resources that are available. So I would encourage you to look to those types of organizations and reach out to them and see what services they might want to be able to provide. Um, Over the last few years, there has been a big emphasis on state, local, tribal governments as a priority for cybersecurity because as like the bigger, harder targets become more secure and harder to attack, these smaller organizations become more interesting to threat actors. I think the library is a good example of that. People say, well, why would they attack the library? It's like, well, because we were easier to attack than the federal government, turns out. So that's my quick thoughts on that.
Thank you. The next question I have is from Dave Rosenkrantz. How much of the challenge in the library's incident response and recovery was a result of potential over-reliance on IT-focused staff being tasked with security and privacy-related responsibilities that, in truth, are an adjacent professional discipline to be staffed separately, i.e., other duties as assigned?
Yeah, I think to be fair, and I've used this analogy in my career in multiple organizations, so this isn't unique to the library. When you work in the public sector, especially if you work for a small to medium-sized agency, you are under constrained environment. And so the way I've often described it is it's a little bit like wilderness first aid. It's often not for a lack of knowledge that there are practices and things that should be done. Like, for example, we know that medicine has solved, how to detect and treat certain types of cancer, for example. But if I'm, on the side of a mountain, 100 miles away from the nearest hospital, knowing that there is a solution in the world that has solved a problem doesn't necessarily mean that it is available to me. So I think in fairness to the library, I think that there is a awareness by a lot of people about how some things should be done. And there is, I think, sometimes a lack of understanding of how do we effectuate that within our environment? And I do think, and I mentioned this earlier, that and it's not unique to the library, that there can be an oversimplification sometimes to think that like because something exists or you interact with it through technology, that therefore it is an IT function. And that I think is something that we're working through within the library to shift. So for example, data management and data handling are a couple of things that I mentioned earlier in the conversation as being really important. That is functionally a collective action. And when you talk about data management, IT is not the owner of data because IT is not in a position to say, you have a valid need to collect sensitive information, or you have a valid need to access sensitive information. There is somebody in the world who is best positioned to decide that, and it's not IT. Because we are all so busy and because we have so many things going on, I think what the cyber attack really emphasized for us is that some of these things have to be prioritized, even if it's at the expense of other things that are also important. Because in our instance, a lot of times, like talking about cybersecurity is a little bit like talking about getting struck by lightning. It's like, okay, I know that like being out in the world, I can get struck by lightning, and I know that that would be bad, but I don't know exactly how bad that would be, and I don't know exactly when or where I'm getting struck by lightning. So like a conversation that was really common before the attack was like, okay, cool, we've identified X, Y, and Z that we should do. Like, how much is that going to cost? And like, if we were to spend $1 million on this, then that means we're not spending $1 million on that. And like, how do you quantify and qualify the value of that? When you go through an attack, you actually have a really, really good idea of how much that costs. And so I think there's a better understanding of the value of doing some of that stuff, whereas before it's a little more abstract or theoretical.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. If you have one, go ahead and put it in there now, or please feel free to raise your hand.
I will say that we did hire a cybersecurity analyst. So if you do have a cyber attack, use that to your advantage to get more money and get more people, because that is the best time to do it. Doing it before the attack is ideal, but if you do end up with an incident, make sure you do leverage that to try and get additional resources, because that is unfortunately a silver lining to the whole event is that that conversation can be different.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to invite Clayton to speak, if you're still available.
I am still here.
Okay, I think you're going to share about your solution.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for that. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with the impact on equity because we've been talking about that. And with me being in Harlem, I don't know, is everybody here in New York or something? Whether or not, I'm in Harlem. And what happens is I hear about issues, particularly around equity, is really important. So I'm glad that is being talked about on this particularly today. And what I am trying to share is this impact on equity is really dramatic, and it does start with the technology of the infrastructure. And you're going to hear me that word infrastructure a lot out of my mouth. I'll be very quick. I won't be very long, but that the ultimately is Wi-Fi is a problem for a long time. I worked with the Department of Defense. I've done a lot of work on these type of things. Recently, we're on 5G technology and all these kind of things. The problem with Wi-Fi is that it's you can easily get access even if you're not in the building, and that's a problem. And it will continue to do so. What we have to do is figure out new infrastructure. It's not the people's problem. It's not people being dumb or anything like that. It's the fact that the infrastructure that we have for many years now is not appropriate. And so what I have been able to do, and I would hope anybody who's in New York come over to my space, I will show you exactly how this works, where I cannot be hacked on anything. And this is critical for things like hospitals and banks and all the kind of stuff, universities and schools and all this stuff easily can be hacked, even if you're just outside. So we have new technology, brand new. No one in the United States has it except for me. And I would love to share what I'm doing because Wi-Fi is like, it's been great for internet for a lot of us for a long time, but it's always been hacked. Almost every company has been hacked. We can get, and for people. And so I think we can definitely make a a difference. So I'm going to give you what it is. Some of you might have heard of it, but I don't think you've ever seen it. It's called Li-Fi. Li-Fi is much more hard for anybody to hack anything out of it because it's about light. You're using light. It's a different kind of fidelity. So you'll have to see it. You'll see it, and we're already starting to figure out start it in Upper Manhattan, but we're going to have it over the entire country because it's important. This is ridiculous that people are getting hacked. It's ridiculous. We can actually. It's not the people's problem. It's the infrastructure. So I'm going to share with you the Li-Fi. Any of those are willing to come see, want to have a Zoom particularly about it, I'm going to go. You have any questions for me on anyone?
Well, you sound like
Charles,
an industry.
I can't hear Charles or you, Catherine. Now I hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, it sounds like you're an industry disruptor there. The invite for this is nationwide. So we have people from all over the US on the call today, and we'll be sharing out the information to people all over. If you are based in the New York area, feel free to reach out to Glayton. I think he put his contact information in the chat here.
Yeah, I put my email in there.
Okay, it looks like I have Samuel has a question. Go ahead, come on.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing. And I just wanted to ask a quick question of how long this technology has been used in New York, what he was sharing. And also, I'm in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. So I'm in the DMV area here. And yeah, the Wi-Fi that you speak of, we do know it's a lot about its vulnerability. So I was going to ask if that technology, where else you said it's not being used in the U.S. except for what you're using now there in New York. Are there any other countries that are using it? That was my question.
The only one right now is India, and they're doing really well with it. Really, really well, even in the most remote areas that they're utilizing. It's in India, and I work with a lot of those folks as well.
Okay, and also you said it's called Li-Fi or Li-Fi. How's it spelled?
Li-Fi, light fidelity, right? So Li-Fi.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing that. And if it's based on light technology, that'll be interesting to take a look at.
Yeah, you got my email, so I'll give you even a little bit more detail because this is critical to happen. I think a lot about it, particularly around the equity piece, which is health, for example. And somebody's getting a X-ray or whatever the case may be can easily be hacked. It's crazy. We will stop that.
Thank you. Then I'll look for it in the chat then because I don't see it,
Okay.
but I'll take a look.
Great.
And I do see people sharing links. Thank you. I have one to add too. That's pretty recent for those of us who have to educate ourselves. Any other questions? Just a couple minutes to go. I'm not seeing anything. So I will go ahead and start closing this out. Charles, thank you so much for working with us and being able to reschedule this call. I was so happy I was able to join this time. Zoom had an outage last time, and only a few people. It was a very exclusive meeting before. So I'm glad we were all able to come together and listen to your presentation. I hope for the other organizations out here, I hope that you're able to either implement these protocols or take them back to your team and begin implementing the protocols. And then also, yeah, feel free to check out all the information in the link here or in the chat here before you go. I'll share out anything that is important also as a follow-up. But again, I appreciate everyone's time and look for our follow-up email with the presentation and the link to this video.